Hey guys, this is the Ecron Writer here. Welcome you back to another one-shot. This time happens to be another Sleepy Hollow fic. This one happens to be one of the weakest, so forgive me if this may seem boring to you guys. But yeah, this is actually my first fic that I've made for the Sleepy Hollow series. Well, not chronologically speaking, but this was actually the very first one-shot I have ever made for Sleepy Hollow Season 2, Dreamscape. So, here it is. This was actually my first attempt on doing a creepypasta. Warning, due to the graphic nature of this story, viewer discretion is advised. I don't own the Sleepy Hollow TV series, excepting my new OC, Gavin. By the way, this is my first creepypasta as I dreamt some of its details, as well as dreaded others. This is my first attempt of writing a Sleepy Hollow fic and horror story. Enjoy! After recently dealing with the supernatural, it was dark and chilly as Abby, Ichabod, and Gavin arrived at his cabin. Whew! Thanks for saving our hides, Ichabod. If it wasn't for you, we probably would have never gotten rid of that insane person who loves to chop off his limbs and regenerate them. That guy deserved to die. I'm sure the Horsemen of Death would have a field day with him. Of course, Gavin. It's simple Greek mythology, really. Like the legend of Hercules and the Hydra. We should use this concept more. Who knew that cauterization would work, Crane? Turns out he's not immortal after all. He started to chuckle, and just before Ichabod rose, he saw his door slightly opened. He couldn't recall not locking it. He always made sure it was secure. Abby suspected it could be a break-in, so she decided they should investigate. She went first, followed by Ichabod, then Gavin. Inside the cabin was neat and completely dark. She turned on the nearby lamp, but it wouldn't work. They continued as they trekked in further, with Abby leading the way, holding her flashlight. There weren't any signs of disarray. Ichabod guessed that Abraham or Henry may have entered here, or perhaps some other paranormal force. Then as Gavin stepped in after them, the door blew shut. They looked at him and he answered, I didn't do anything. To make sure he jiggled the knob, but it was tight. Oh no, the door's locked. There's no way out. We're trapped. There has to be some kind of horror at foot. Abby drew out her pistol and loaded the chamber. Figures. Everybody stay alert. While they searched the place, Gavin had an idea. He gazed at the fireplace. He hoped they would climb up and escape on the roof. Suddenly it ignited all on its own as he stepped to it. Ah! What the hell just happened? Ichabod warned him to stay away from the chimney. Then they heard a screech as a shadowy creature dropped from above and lunged into Gavin. They ran to him and Ichabod was worried he could be possessed. Gavin assured them he was fine. Then he began to feel lightheaded. Fell on all fours and another one dropped and charged into Ichabod's body before he reacted. In a moment he started to feel weak. They both collapsed in a heap. Then Abby heard an ear-piercing scream. She saw the banshee and started to shoot a few rounds, but it was no use. The bullet seemed to go right through it. He gave a sinister grin and cackled at her. Then with no defense, it absorbed into her. In a few seconds her head became fuzzy, then her vision dimmed. Her strength drained away from her, and she struggled to keep her head up. When she couldn't take it, she fell to the floor next to the others and lost consciousness. The next thing he knew, Gavin woke up in the middle of a desolate forest. Dead trees were all around, and the sky was overcast with an ominous shade of gray. His head cleared, and he found he was alone. Strangely, there was no wind or brisk temperature, as if the air has grown stagnant. There weren't any sounds from birds or bugs, either. Wherever he was, Gavin knew he had to find his friends. Somehow he knew he was no longer in Sleepy Hollow. Wandering the woods, he had a sense of anxiety. Letting out his frustration, he yelled, "Where the hell am I?" Unfortunately, no one heard him. However, he did hear something in the distance. It belonged to a flute playing a slow, low tune. He saw nobody, but as the song finished, he recalled what it belonged to. Narrowing his eyes, he muttered, "That flute. The Pied Piper. He must be here. But how?" It was known that whoever heard the flute, people would fall into a deep trance. Fortunately, he felt nothing, and he headed toward the source. Recently, he and Abby put an end to it. He couldn't take the suspense anymore, and he shouted, "I know it's you, Pied Piper! You know your music has no effect on me! Show yourself, you bastard!" He was pinned to the ground, and his hands were bound behind his neck. "All right, tough guy, you want a piece of—" He looked behind him, and he saw a familiar face. "Abby?" The hold got stronger as the piper played again. Gavin sank lower to the ground. She was nearly crushing him. He managed to plead to her. "Abby, snap out of it! You can fight this thrall he has over you! Ah!" She grabbed and pulled his dark blonde hair, and with her free hand she reached for a pistol from her back pocket. With his eyes, Gavin saw that she was ready to shoot him. Using all his strength, he struggled to break free. She tried to hold and pull him back as he resisted. He kicked, and then she flipped him onto his back and slapped his face hard. Gavin saw stars, and he was very dazed. He only felt himself being dragged across the ground, and his head rested on a nearby rock. He was sitting upright, and he saw Abby reach for her gun. She aimed directly at his head. He thought he heard a vehement voice like Moloch's, telling her to shoot him. He dove in and raised her arm just before she shot it. The piper squealed in pain, and Gavin saw Big Stone. He fixed his eyes on the bone flute, and he slammed the rock, breaking it into pieces. Wide-eyed, the horror dissipated, and Gavin took deep breaths to calm himself, despite his body shaking. He then saw Abby lying lifelessly on the ground. He scrambled next to her and tried to wake her up. He pleaded her to awaken and still be alive, but she wouldn't stir. Then he felt a warm sensation in his right wrist, but he ignored it. Close to tears, he wondered what would Jenny think, or Ichabod. She is a witness. What could they do with her like this? He collapsed on her chest, and then her eyes started to flutter. She opened and wondered where she was. She whispered his name, and Gavin gasped and hugged her tightly. He couldn't stop telling her how glad he was to see her. "Don't ever scare me like that again, okay? Don't you ever do that." She asked what happened, and he explained everything. He also mentioned the return of the piper didn't make sense. Then it came to him. He said they're not in Sleepy Hollow. Instead, they're in some kind of dream world, as if the nightmare is testing them in some peculiar way. They're in an alternate reality, like the Matrix, which means if they die in the dream, it's real. Abby decided to find Crane. She discussed what it was like when dealing with the Sandman, but it's not quite the same. As you would see in Season 1. What was that episode? Triumph of Evil? Something like that. Suddenly they heard a huge bang. They hesitated and saw a flash of light. Gavin thought it was thunder, but Abby said it belonged to a weapon. Then a redcoat fell right in front of them out of nowhere. A musket was laying beside him. More weapons fired, and there were shouting. Gavin figured it was the revolution again. He and Abby rushed into the center of the battlefield. Redcoats were fighting off patriots, but what caught their attention was Ichabod fighting a strange person. He had a leather mask, a strange marking on his left hand, and holding an axe. The Hessian! They must move fast before he kills them, so Abby had an idea. The axe was knocked away, and it was a sword fight. They can't let him slice Crane's chest. Behind a tree, Gavin yelled, "Hey! Learn how to use a sword right! Like this!" He stabbed him in the ribs and signaled Abby to shoot him in the skull. The bullet made contact and he fell back. Seconds later, everyone disappeared but Ichabod. They reunited and explained their predicament. The guys knew the dream wasn't over yet. Ichabod suspected the banshees took them here to test their subconscious minds. He said that each symbol is significant no matter how absurd. Every item has a meaning. Spoken like fruit, Crane. Like the analytical historian he was. He ordered them to stick together and find the source of that dream. Gavin saw a field covered in skulls. Crane said it could mean danger is ahead, so they must be ready for whatever is next. He also saw a pond not filled with water, but with blood. Abby asked if it was deep, and he snapped a twig from a nearby tree and poked into it. Sure enough, it was. Ichabod said that blood usually resembles life, and this could be the core of it all. Then it began to spin violently like a whirlpool. Gavin immediately backed away. Then two massive, grotesque pink arms with veins showing through stuck out and grabbed the ground. As it rose, its body was rotting. It was humongous and sagging with numerous layers of skin. It had no feet, massive abdomen, a drooping face, a giant maw, red eyes with black pupils, and was approximately 20 feet tall. It groaned and didn't seem to move, but expand over the blood pool. Ichabod and Abby were horrified of what they saw, and Gavin fainted on the spot. They ran to him, and after checking his pulse, Abby assured he only passed out. "What is that disturbing horror?" The monster roared, and Abby made a few shots. The bullets barely caused any pain. It was as if it was immune to them. In its rage, it swiped her like a fly using its thick left arm, sending her a few feet away. When Ichabod got to her, she lost consciousness. He fixed his eyes on the rotting pink tower of terror. She gazed at him and gave an evil grin. He took out Gavin's sword, and upon looking at her face, it was what she wanted. To seduce him, he thought. He cried as he sliced her colossal chest with his blade. She screamed in agony, reached down and grabbed Ichabod using one thick hand and raised him above her mouth. "Yes, that's it. Throw me inside!" As if on cue, she shoved him in a hole. He fell into her stomach with an enormous splash. He then heard screeches similar to the banshees he saw. Then something caught his eye. As if the dream couldn't get any more disturbing, he saw corpses floating at the surface. The stench and the sight of the contents almost made him hurl. He barely caught his breath as he got out, and onto dry land close to the blood-red walls. When he regained composure, he decided to use Gavin's sword to help him climb out. The walls were spongy but solid, and the crevices made his footing easier. Just then he heard screeches and saw the demons closing fast on him. Using his blade, he attempted to swipe them away while still holding onto the wall with his free hand. Then the wall started to close in. Fearing he'd get crushed, Ichabod climbed up faster and harder while the walls continued to inch their way toward him. Just in the nick of time, he got out and emerged at his heart. He figured it was almost like the same size as a blue whale's. Gazing at it, he knew he could end the dream by destroying it. Thinking what the disgusting pile of flesh did to his friends, Ichabod raised his sword and declared, "By hell's heart, I stab at thee!" He stabbed it. In his anger, he tore the heart apart, spewing blood everywhere as he sliced her arteries. Outside, the monster eyed Abby, but before she got to her, she clutched her upper chest and gave an enormous scream. Finally, she stood straight up, then her body exploded. Ichabod hit and rolled on the ground, and moments later, everything went blank. Gavin was the first one who woke up inside the cabin. It was broad daylight. He looked around and heard his birds chirping. Realizing he was back at the real world, alive and well, he sighed with relief. We're out of it. Soon Abby came to. He watched her as she wakened. Seeing her worried face, she said she was okay. They both saw Ichabod, who didn't recover yet. They both lifted his body and laid him on the bed. Several minutes later, he began to regain consciousness. Gavin asked how he managed to end the nightmare since they were both out of commission. Crane recalled everything from the sight of the monster to the explosion of her chest. Holding his hand, she smiled. "You did it, Crane. We did it, Lieutenant. Together." He stated it would have been Moloch or perhaps Henry. using their minds against each other and literally lose their heads through their necromancy. Abby asked what the last monster was. Crane didn't have a clue. Gavin chimed in that, uh, that he does, and he showed them at the archives. It was a video, a collab countdown on YouTube. This was where he found out about it. Never thought he'd see it in person. Ichabod was skeptical since it came from the video game, but Abby recalled him saying that all symbols in a dream have meaning. He stood corrected. She persuaded Gavin to explain what the thing was, and he broke down the process, including how the banshees or dark spawn were involved in it. The horror was known as the Broodmother from a game he never played or nor heard of. It was a 9-day process. The first day, the darkspawn captures all women from various races. By the 6th day, they all get infected, and the process is unknown. Then the women scream, but only in their dreams. In the 7th day, the demons vomit into their bodies, causing them to swell up and do other things. That alone explains what Ichabod dealt with inside the Broodmother's stomach. On the 8th day, the victims are violated. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I do believe it's— No! They force Gavin to stop his theory. And finally, on the last day, the Broodmother grins and literally devours her kin. For something so vile, Abby remarked with abhorrence, "No wonder you passed out. Something so horrific like that couldn't possibly leave your mind." They were all truly grateful that Crane put an end to the nightmare for good. However, Gavin said he discovered something before Abby woke up. His hand felt warm, and a strange emblem had appeared. He's yet to find out what it could mean. You'll find out soon enough, sleepyheads. Originally, this was based on a dream I had. There was a field of skulls and a pool of boiling blood in the center of the woods, but the rest was made up. Never played nor heard of Dragon Age or even Dragon Age Origins, but the Broodmother was seen on a YouTube collab of the most disturbing bosses from non-horror games. Even though that game in particular should be horror. Some of the details were cut out for this story. When I first saw it, even I thought I was going to faint. Darkspawn are actually humanoids, but I thought demons would be better. And it should be demons. The short description during the intro was based on Albedo from Xenosaga. Never played it either, but he still had to go somehow. Moloch is known as the Demon King and the Master of the Horsemen. One of them happens to be Ichabod's son, and Moloch has traumatized Abby and Jenny since they were teens. His motive is to merge Purgatory with Sleepy Hollow or the living world, and he's capable of causing illusions and nightmares. In this case, use Ichabod, Abby, and Gavin's own fears as murder weapons, and at one time, he even possessed Abby by using the Pied Piper's trance spell to try to kill Gavin. That is creepy. So, how did I do for my first horror story? Or my first one for Sleepy Hollow? Please leave a response in the comments section. Until next time, sleepyheads. And I'm the Ecron Writer, signing out.